Today, as every November the 20th, we gather together, even virtually due to these pandemic times, to remember all our brothers and mostly sisters, especially black and brown, who were taken away early by the irrationality of transphobia. This year, we're not only remembering our sisters and brothers that passed away due to our well known pandemic, violence against trans people, but also we remember those of our community that lost their lives due to the unknown, until now, pandemic of COVID 19. Even though we are witnessing changes in parents' reactions towards their trans children, the reality is that the familiar device tends to correct, repress, and tries to suppress any glimpse of known appropriate behavior, always with violence of any kind, physical, psychological, economical, and social. We are punished every day at schools by bullies, many times under the complacent and complicit look of transphobic teachers. At that age, we start to ask ourselves, how am I going to start? How am I going to focus on studying when I'm under constant attack for who I am? And at the same time, trying to survive every day without getting beaten. Why do I have to remain in a place that clearly hates my presence? And too many of us fly away from those places in order to just be ourselves, but without the necessary tools. At that point, we can rely only on our only capital available in order to survive. Many others, unfortunately, simply cannot stand all that cruelty in such early stages of life and decide to make it stop. They are highly remembered today as well. Any Trans Day of Remembrance has a special place for our mothers, Sylvia and Marcia, our black, brown, sex worker activist mothers. The work commemorated 2 years ago the riots that ignited what we call now the LGBTIQ plus movement. And 52 years after that, Sylvia's and Marcia's daughters and granddaughters are still at the end of the line. We are still lacking of the most basic human rights, like the right of a non-pathologized identity or the right to decent housing. This plays a huge role in the structural violence that we face. Western society has been trying to annihilate our presence from all the lands that it invaded and looted. We have been here since the beginning. Mushes, Ijras, Azogs, Catois, Fa Afafines have existed before Christianism and will remain here alongside the humankind. It is no surprise that in times where trans visibility and positive trans references are rising everywhere, we are also witnessing a huge backlash from the same old patriarchy with its all same violence that has been from the Inquisition to the DSM, just to keep us invisible, silent, and forgotten. Simone de Beauvoir has famously said, "The enemy won't be that strong if he didn't have accomplices among its own oppressed." That was a reality at the time, and it's a reality now. And we have plenty of examples, like the fictional author with all the privilege and platform that she has, that have spent the last year spreading hatred towards our collective and accusing us of all the possible evil just because we pretend to have the same right to exist like anybody else. These necessary accomplices of racist and classist white heteropatriarchy began their particular crusade 21 years ago against what they're considered to be the worst sexist violence that can exist, prostitution, without realizing that in reality the worst sexist violence that persists is the lack of access to capital, the lack of economic independence for trans and cis women. Their Judeo-Christian morality and pride led them 21 years ago to legislate on an activity ignoring completely that has been and is the lifeblood of thousands of us. In 21 years, sex workers in Sweden haven't been taken into account when legislating about their lives. Our sex worker-led organizations are systemically prevented from opening bank accounts, thus impeding to organize any pandemic relief fund in these times. Under the pretext of combating trafficking, consensual sex work has been very hardly conflated with a crime classified worldwide, such as modern slavery, which is present in the economic sectors where very vulnerable people work, such as the textile industry, the agriculture, and domestic work. extensively documented by the International Labour Organization. This tricky conflation also affects the true victims of trafficking, who are often deported to their countries where they were already in danger in the first place. In France, since the Swedish model was implemented, attacks on sex workers have increased by 60%, and as a result of the conditions created by this law, our sisters Jessica Sarmiento and Vanessa Campos, two trans women from Peru, as well as 8 other cisgender sex workers in the last 10 months, are no longer within us. The COVID-19 pandemic has starkly shown the living conditions in which trans women survive, and no European women's legislation or lobby has changed it at all by systemically refusing to recognize our work as such. They deprive us from any existing legal tool in the workplace to defend ourselves against terrible working conditions that are precisely the result of this lack of formal recognition. Those who cry out so much for our permanent rescue were comfortably at home, receiving their full salaries and teleworking, encouraging everyone to stay at home, and referring us to the general social services of the municipalities, which were already overwhelmed by COVID-19. They were unable to even donate of their own funds to the multiple sex worker-led initiatives that emerged during the lockdowns. The end of transphobia comes hand in hand with the destigmatization of our lives and the expansion of our rights for a population that has seen them systematically denied. It is a lie that my freedom ends where that another begins, but that my freedom expands, so does that of others. It is time to be humble and recognize that Sweden has been on the wrong path for 21 years, that the criminalization of only one part invariably means the criminalization of the whole. As long as states are not actively concerned about including trans people in the informal labor market, sex work will be our life-saving activity, as always. I personally miss in this so advanced Europe an initiative that has been had in Argentina with trans job quota. And even so, although these quotas will begin tomorrow, November the 21st, it will continue to be insufficient for all of us to embrace it. So many of us will continue to do sex work. It is a reality, and we needed to do it in the highest safety conditions, and this can all be done with rights. Only the rights can fix the wrongs. Trans, conciencia, memoria y resistencia.